Welcome to the interview. We're in Dublin, where the government is putting out all the stops to get Ireland Brexit ready. Our guest is the thorniest, Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney. Fáilte France 24. Welcome to France 24.
Thank you.
The United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, will leave the EU next March, while the Republic of Ireland remains a member. If the UK crashes out of the EU without an agreement, what could be the consequences for this island?
Well, first of all, I don't think the United Kingdom will crash out. But of course, the prospect of Britain crashing out does frighten people. And particularly, it's impactful in Northern Ireland because if you're a nationalist in Northern Ireland, you fear the potential of a return as an unintended consequence of Brexit, of a hard border on the island of Ireland. And I think many unionists fear that too, by the way. It's not just nationalists. The memories of border infrastructure on the island of Ireland are very bad memories, very tragic memories, in some cases very violent memories. And the idea that on 300 road crossings between Ireland and Northern Ireland, on a 300-kilometre border, that we would attempt Britain and Ireland to try to reimpose border infrastructure and the security infrastructure that would be required around that infrastructure, to me is just something that we cannot accept. And so we need to find a way to avoid that.
At the last EU summit, the Irish government warned of a risk of a return to violence through a hard border. How serious is that threat?
Well, I mean, what I would say to any skeptics out there that think that the Irish government might be using this as a political tool is that, don't listen to us. Listen to the Chief Constable. The Chief Police Officer in Northern Ireland has bluntly warned about this issue. That if he is asked to provide security for border infrastructure again, he will need significant increases in resources, and has warned of the potential for the corrosive effect on relationships of attempting to do that. So,
potentially army back on the streets of Northern Ireland?
Well, I mean, I think we need to be careful that we don't, pump this up into something that creates tensions by simply talking about it. But undoubtedly, an attempt to create a new physical barrier between Ireland and Northern Ireland, when for 20 years after the peace agreement, we have seen the absence of border infrastructure, where because of joint EU membership and shared membership of the customs union and single market, what we have had through the peace agreement was political agreement on north-south cooperation across over 200 different areas. And the joint EU membership has allowed us to do that in a seamless way. So you have an all-island economy now where there are 30,000 border crossings every single day. We have learned to live together as neighbours in a relatively peaceful environment. And the all-island economy and the ecosystem around that has helped people to interact with each other, work together, in a way that normalizes relationships on the island of Ireland after a period of real conflict and tragedy and violence. And that is what's at stake here for us. I don't think we will return to the violence of the past, but certainly we will be going backwards rather than forwards. Anybody who has looked at this independently, and lots of people have, cannot point to any border anywhere in the world where you have a completely seamless, invisible border. If one side of that border is in a different customs union and single market to the other side of that border.
Now, we're told that 95% of the deal between the UK and the EU is there, and the 5% remaining to be agreed is the question of the Irish border. Why is it such a conundrum for the UK?
This is difficult because if you're a unionist in Northern Ireland, what maintaining full alignment with the rules of the EU customs union and single market in Northern Ireland means is the potential for checks, or more checks than are currently there today, for goods that are travelling between Britain and Northern Ireland.
It's a border in the Irish Sea.
Well, that's the concern, yes. And so Michel Barnier has worked very hard in recent months to try to de-dramatise that concern, which is a real and genuine concern in Northern Ireland. I've spoken to hundreds of unionists who are concerned about this issue and want to understand what's being proposed. So can I say this very clearly? Nobody is asking for a solution here that would compromise or undermine the United Kingdom in terms of its sovereignty or in terms of its economic independence. So Northern Ireland, we don't like this, but we have to accept it. Northern Ireland is leaving the European Union with the rest of the United Kingdom. Nobody's questioning that. We're trying to come up with a complicated solution to preventing physical border infrastructure re-emerging potentially. We need an insurance mechanism that can't happen. That's the backstop. And what the British government has said is that they cannot accept a backstop that essentially splits the United Kingdom into two different customs unions. In other words, they don't want any customs checks across the Irish Sea. What Theresa May is asking for is that she wants a backstop that is effectively UK-wide on customs.
Do you think there will be a Brexit agreement between the EU and the UK this side of Christmas?
I do. We can get this Irish border issue agreed as well. I think we're working towards a solution there that everybody can live with and nobody feels threatened by. I hope we can get that done in November. A deal is needed now to try to create a calm politically that can allow us to manage this hugely difficult and challenging prospect of a country the size of Britain and an economy the size of Britain leaving the European Union, to manage that in an orderly way that doesn't create chaos.
As tensions mount with Brexit, do you think that the warm relation that Ireland used to enjoy with its nearest neighbour are breaking down?
No, I would say that very strongly. You know, I'm somebody who has been in university in England. In some ways, I'm a product of the Anglo-Irish relationship. My mother held a British passport for much of her life. She still has a brother and sister who are arguably the most English people I know. So while I'm a very proud Irish person, I don't have an anti-British bone in my body. I believe Britain is a great country, but is a country that, in my view, is making a mistake here. But regardless of that mistake, I think we all have an obligation to try to ensure that Britain stays close to Europe and stays close to the EU. Don't forget, Northern Ireland, while it is a part of the United Kingdom, is a special part of the United Kingdom and a special part of the island of Ireland. You know, people in Northern Ireland have a birthright to Irish citizenship or British citizenship if they want.
That's the Good Friday Agreement.
That's the Good Friday Agreement.
Do you think that, paradoxically, Brexit has brought back some questions of identity, and that a referendum on the reunification of Ireland is on the cards now, which it wasn't a couple of years ago?
Well, undoubtedly Brexit has forced identity politics to come to the fore again in Northern Ireland. There's no question about that. You know, in some ways, nationalists look to government in Dublin for protection, and unionists are looking to government in London for protection. In the absence of devolved government in Northern Ireland, there is no political platform in Northern Ireland apart from megaphone diplomacy. Because of that, some people in Northern Ireland have started calling for border polls. We have made it very clear that we do not support those calls. Certainly we don't support them now because we have enough complication and enough fear linked with Brexit that we're trying to protect the status quo through Brexit.
How do you grade the negotiating skills of Michel Barnier, the EU negotiator, who's negotiating on Ireland's behalf?
He's been to Ireland on numerous occasions. He's taken the time, and when I say time, I mean he has spent weeks understanding the complexity of the, as some people call it, the Ireland question when it comes to Brexit. And I think he really understands it, and I think he's emotionally in tune with it too, which is important in the context of understanding the politics here. So Michel Barnier is the embodiment of reinforcing why Irish people care about the European Union right now.
Do you think UK citizens will be asked to vote again on a Brexit referendum in a second referendum?
I think it's possible, but probably unlikely. I don't think it's likely to happen without a general election in the meantime in Britain.
In any case, Ireland is getting Brexit ready. What plans, what contingency plans are you setting in motion?
We're investing quite heavily in our ports and airports now. We have no option, in my view, but to prepare. And I hope it'll be wasted money because I hope we'll have a future relationship that's so comprehensive that it doesn't require border infrastructure. But we have to plan. You know, we have a 70 billion euro trade relationship every year, east-west between Ireland and the UK. This is a relationship that cannot simply be undone or pulled apart, And that is why we are working with all of those businesses now through our state agencies. We're putting hundreds of millions of euros into Brexit contingency to ensure that our businesses understand what's at stake and what they need to prepare for, and to ensure that we can give them the supports that they need to transition through Brexit and out the other side to protect and grow their businesses.
How can Ireland take advantage of Brexit? Are there companies moving already from the UK into Ireland?
Yes is the answer to that. I mean, there are upsides in certain areas, research projects in universities that want to hold on to EU funding. Certainly in terms of financial services, we've seen some of the big investment banks making decisions to essentially relocate EU headquarters in Dublin from London. But look, the potential small upsides here do not come close to rebalancing the downside of Brexit.
Ireland has become a new member of the Francophonie. Are you trying to solidify your relations in continental Europe post-Brexit?
Absolument, bien sûr. We're building new alliances, new relationships, conscious of the fact that the EU without Britain will be a different place for Ireland. And that means the kind of new alliances that we're now talking about.
Tánaiste, thank you. Our guest was the Irish Deputy Prime Minister, Simon Coveney. Stay with us on France 24.
Across Africa, presented by Georgia Calvin-Smith.
From North to South Africa, from Bamako to Nairobi, from Accra to Mogadishu. Bringing you all the political, economic, cultural and social news from Africa for a better insight into an ever-changing continent.
Across Africa on France 24 and France24.com. The Mapuche, Chile's biggest indigenous people, have had enough. They're furious that the government is destroying their forests in Patagonia to build modern infrastructure. Now, they're stepping up their resistance. The Chilean government regards them as terrorists and is cracking down.
The violence comes from the state. It comes from the capitalist system, which causes and reinforces the repression of the Mapuche people.
Is Patagonia about to explode? Don't miss our unprecedented investigation into this historic conflict.
Our special correspondents are the real eyewitnesses of the news. Join me for reporters.